Hi guys, this is part one of your lecture on the Cold War. So today you are going to learn 10 things about the Cold War, and I have a Quizlet set for you that has 33 terms. After you watch this video, I want you to study just the first 10 things on that Quizlet set. Okay? So the first thing is, I realized that this isn't backwards. I thought it was backwards, but then it wasn't. So there you go. So what are 10 things to know about communism? Okay. So one, communism has a centralized or government-controlled economy. That's called a command economy, where the government controls the whole economy. Second thing to know about communism is there's no freedom of speech, no freedom of religion, no freedom of movement. But the third thing is there is technically freedom from hunger, freedom from freezing to death, freedom from, not, so there's no freedom to do what you want, but there's technically freedom from hardship, technically. Fourth thing to know about communism is that the workers control the factories, the workers own the economy, technically. Fifth thing is that the goal of communism is that the workers will overthrow the wealthy and they will seize control of all of those things. Sixth thing is that the emphasis is on the group. The emphasis is on the whole society and what's called the collective, not on the individual. A seventh thing to know about communism is that the government is responsible for all of basic needs. The government provides housing and food and clothing and a job. The government provides for the people. The eighth thing to know is that there's no opportunity to move up, to get richer. There's not any choice in where you want to be in society. There's no movement. Everybody's supposed to be equal, so there's no social climbing at all. The ninth thing that's very important to know about communism is that traditionally it's almost always been paired with dictatorship, or what's called a totalitarian government. So a very, very strict government, usually one that rules using fear, using violence, using the military to police the people. And so usually communism goes together with oppressive government. It's not technically, maybe ideally supposed to be like that, but it ends up being like that almost everywhere that it's happened. The 10th thing to know about communism is that it has not usually made people particularly well off. People are supposed to be equal, but people tend to be poor in communist societies. Okay, number 2 is, what are 10 things to know about capitalism? Okay, number 1, there's a free market, which means the government doesn't get involved in business. Number 2, there is all freedom of speech, of movement, of religion, freedom to do what you want to do, freedom, there's choice. Number 3, there's not necessarily freedom from want. There's not freedom from hunger. There's not freedom from freezing to death. In capitalism, you are free to starve. So the government does not protect you. Number 4, the means of production, the big companies and factories are owned by wealthy individuals and companies. They're privately owned. There's private property. Number 5, the goal of capitalism is that the free market will raise everyone's standard of living, that the free market will create the best situation. That's the goal of capitalism. Number 6, in capitalism, the emphasis is on the individual, not on the group. So the idea that you as an individual have the responsibility and the opportunity to make your life better. That means that you are responsible for your health care, you are responsible for your education, you are responsible for your clothing, you're responsible for your shelter. The wealthy can choose to share their money with the poor, but they don't have to. The poor may benefit from assistance, but it's not guaranteed. Number 7 is that there's minimal taxation. So in our kind of not really pure capitalism, we have capitalism with some socialism. So we do pay taxes for education and the roads and the post office and the military and things like that. In pure capitalism, there'd be no taxation and the government doesn't take care of anything, any vital services. Now, most capitalist societies have some socialism, meaning that there is tax money that goes toward firefighters and police and things like that. Number 8 is that there's opportunity to move up. So you have choice. Usually what that means is there is extreme social inequality. In most capitalist societies today, United States, India, Brazil, any kind of capitalist country you can think of, there is extremely rich and extremely poor. And that is a typical function of capitalism. Number 9 is almost always paired with democracy, with free votes, free elections, choosing your representatives. And number 10, it's usually created societies with individual freedom, like freedom of the press, and the possibility of a higher standard of living. So capitalist countries typically have a higher standard of living than communist ones do, even though there's no protection from poverty. Okay, what's our third thing today? Our third thing is the United Nations. So after World War II, they made this group, which is like the government of the world, called the United Nations. Today, there are maybe 193 countries in it, like almost all the countries in the world, like almost 200 countries are part of the United Nations. The United Nations has 2 major purposes: to promote peace and security, meaning stability. So today, the United Nations does like humanitarian aid and environmental protection. It protects human rights, protects international law. The main function of the UN is to promote peace and to promote stability. So it tries to help out so countries don't have civil wars, and it tries to help refugees, things like that. That's the United Nations. But the main thing you want to know about the United Nations is peace and stability. Okay, what is our fourth question on Quizlet? Which were the 2 Cold War superpowers? The United States and the Soviet Union. Quick quiz. Which one of those countries do we usually call America? Ding ding, the United States. Which one of those countries do we usually call USA? The United States. Quick question. Which one of those countries is also called the Soviet Union? Ding ding ding, it's the USSR. Which one of those countries is Russia plus a bunch of other countries? Ding ding ding, USSR. USSR started in 1917 and it lasted till 1991. There's no more Soviet Union today. There's just Russia and all the countries that used to be in the Soviet Union. So 2 Cold War superpowers, US, USSR. Okay, also known as the Soviet Union. Number 5. Hey, we're halfway through. Yay. When was the Cold War? Cold War started after World War II. It ended in 91. So it was the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s. And so I was a Cold War baby because I was born in the 70s. I'm so old. All right, number 6. Which countries became communist? That is number 6 right here for Quizlet. Which countries became communist? The answer is a whole bunch of them. So the USSR is like Russia plus 14 other countries, right? And then all of the countries that like surrounded Russia, like on the European side of Russia, like almost all of those countries went communist. So like Poland, Hungary, what was called Yugoslavia, which is now a bunch of other countries like Serbia and stuff. It was called Yugoslavia. Czechoslovakia, which was made of what is now the Czech Republic and Slovakia. Other countries, so like a bunch of countries on the European side of Russia. So the Soviet Union was like Russia plus, and then they had like all these other countries on their borders. Then in Asia, China was communist. A lot of Southeast Asia, like eventually like Vietnam and like Laos, Cambodia, those countries were communist. Some in the Middle East, like Afghanistan. In Latin America, Cuba was communist, and then a lot of other countries, kind of quasi-communist, tried to go communist, but the United States tried to stop them from being communist. In Africa, Angola, Congo, Mozambique, there were a number of countries in Africa. So all over the world, a bunch of communist countries. Number 7, I think we already did 7. 7 says, what does the USSR stand for? The Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Soviet is a worker, but people just call it the Soviet Union. Like the workers' union, right? Number 8, why were communists successful in Russia and China? Because they had the support of the peasants, the poor farmers, the regular people, rose up and said, we want to get rid of the emperor, we want to get rid of the czar, we wanted the workers to be in charge. So they had the support of the poor peasants. Okay, number 9. Who were the main Soviet leaders during the Cold War? Okay. Here we go. Main Soviet Union leaders during the Cold War. So the main were Lenin, who started the Soviet Union, Stalin, who killed the most people during the Cold War, then Khrushchev. The other main leaders were Brezhnev and Gorbachev. Gorbachev is the Soviet leader who ended the Cold War. He's probably primarily responsible for ending communism in the Soviet Union. It was mostly him who ended it, and mostly Lenin who started it. So Lenin, Stalin, Khrushchev, Brezhnev, Gorbachev. Last question for today is dun, 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 number 10. Who were the U.S. presidents during the Cold War? Okay. Do you know any? Think of any U.S. presidents you've heard of. These are all before you were born, but you probably have heard of a bunch of these. Ready? Truman, Harry Truman. Eisenhower, Dwight D. Eisenhower, or Ike. Kennedy, JFK, or John F. Kennedy. Johnson, Lyndon B. Johnson, or LBJ. Nixon, Richard Nixon. Carter, Jimmy Carter. And Reagan, Ronald Reagan. So Truman is the president at the end of World War II, at the beginning of the Cold War. Reagan is the president in the 80s, end of the Cold War. Technically, the Soviet Union falls after Reagan and with Bush Sr. So, have you heard of some of those American presidents? Probably. Okay, so that was like 12 minutes, and I hope you guys are well. Let me know if you have any questions. Go study the first 10 things on Quizlet that I just covered. Okay? And have a good day. All right. Bye, guys.